Sophia adjusted the last decorative pillow on the couch and stepped back to admire their new living room. The soft glow of the pendant lights reflected off the marble countertops, the fresh scent of newly delivered furniture still lingering in the air. It was everything she and Daniel had dreamed of. A spacious, modern apartment with 4 suites, perfect for their new life together. They had worked hard for this, selling their old place and securing a mortgage to afford this upgrade. Every sacrifice had been worth it. Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Can you believe it?" he murmured. "It's finally ours." Sophia leaned into him, smiling. "It feels surreal. We made it, Daniel." He kissed her cheek, then checked his watch. "We should start getting ready." "The wedding's in a few hours." Sophia nodded, but a shadow of concern flickered across her face. It wasn't the wedding that worried her. It was Daniel's mother, Evelyn. The woman had always been overbearing, treating her son like a boy who still needed guidance, despite him being a grown man with a career and a wife. At the reception, the atmosphere was lively, clinking glasses, laughter, and the soft hum of music playing in the background. Sophia sipped her champagne, keeping a polite smile as Daniel chatted with his relatives. Across the room, she spotted Evelyn, her gaze lingering on them with an expression Sophia had seen too many times before. And then it happened. As soon as Daniel sat back beside her, Evelyn approached with a calculated smile, her husband trailing behind. "Daniel, sweetheart, I need to talk to you," Evelyn said, placing a hand on his arm. Sophia already knew it wasn't a request. "What's going on, Mom?" Daniel asked, slightly wary. Evelyn cast a quick glance at Sophia before sighing dramatically. "It's about Becca." Sophia stiffened. Becca, Daniel's younger sister, was the golden child, spoiled, sheltered, and never forced to deal with real-world consequences. "She and Jason can't afford a place right now," Evelyn continued. "The wedding and honeymoon drained them. They have nowhere to go." Daniel's brows furrowed. "I thought Jason's family was helping them." "They were," Evelyn admitted, "but they backed out at the last minute. Can you believe it? And Becca, poor thing, is devastated. They need a place. And I was thinking—" She hesitated, as if pretending to weigh her words carefully. "You have all that space now. 4 suites, just you and Sophia. Surely you wouldn't mind letting them stay for a while." Sophia's grip on her champagne glass tightened. Daniel blinked. "Mom, we just moved in. We haven't even settled yet." Evelyn waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, it's just temporary. A few months, maybe a year at most. They need family right now, Daniel, and you've always been the responsible one." Sophia knew what that meant. Daniel had always been the one who fixed things, who stepped up when no one else did. And Evelyn had mastered the art of using that against him. "Mom, we need to talk about this," Daniel said cautiously. Evelyn's expression darkened, her voice turning sharp. "Talk about what? Becca is your sister. You should be willing to help without hesitation." Sophia had enough. "Evelyn, we're not running a hotel." Evelyn's eyes snapped to her, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Excuse me?" Sophia met her gaze without flinching. "We just moved in. This is our home, and we need to make decisions together." Evelyn let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, I see how it is. Now that you have Daniel, you think you can dictate everything." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mom, that's not what she's saying." "Then what is she saying?" Evelyn shot back. "That we should leave Becca and Jason homeless." Sophia exhaled slowly, keeping her voice calm. "Becca and Jason are adults. They knew their wedding would be expensive. They should have planned for this." Evelyn scoffed. "You wouldn't understand. You don't have siblings." Sophia's patience was thinning. "That doesn't change the fact that this is a decision Daniel and I have to make together." Evelyn turned to Daniel with a wounded expression. "Sweetheart, I just thought you'd want to do the right thing." Sophia watched as Daniel struggled. She knew he hated disappointing his mother, but this wasn't about Becca. This was about control. "Mom, let me think about it," Daniel finally said. Evelyn huffed but nodded. "Fine, but don't take too long." As soon as she walked away, Sophia turned to Daniel, her voice firm. "You do realize that if Becca moves in, she'll never leave, right?" Daniel sighed. "Sophia, she's my sister." "She's also irresponsible," Sophia countered. "And your mom, she's pushing this on you because she knows you'll have a hard time saying no." Daniel rubbed his face. "I just need to figure out how to handle this." Sophia's chest tightened. "Handle it fast, Daniel, because I won't let your mother run our home." They sat in silence, the weight of Evelyn's demand settling between them like an unwelcome guest. Sophia barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Evelyn's voice echoed in her mind. "You should be willing to help without hesitation." It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in guilt. She turned onto her side, watching Daniel as he slept, his breathing slow and steady. He had always been the responsible one, the fixer, the son who never disappointed, and Evelyn knew it. She was counting on it. By morning, the tension had settled between them like a thick fog. Daniel was unusually quiet as they got ready for the day, sipping his coffee while staring at his phone. Sophia finally broke the silence. "Have you made a decision?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know yet." Sophia's jaw tightened. "What's there to think about?" "Our home isn't a backup plan for Becca and Jason," Daniel sighed, setting his mug down. "It's just, she's my sister, Sophia. I feel responsible." Sophia exhaled sharply. "She's not a child. She got married. She should have planned for her future instead of expecting you to fix it for her." Daniel pressed his fingers against his temples. "I just need time to figure this out." Sophia crossed her arms. "Daniel, time won't change anything. Your mother made up her mind before she even spoke to you. She expects you to say yes." His phone buzzed. They both glanced at it. The name on the screen made Sophia's stomach twist. "Mom." Daniel hesitated before answering. "Hey, Mom." Sophia stepped away, pretending to check her emails, but she could hear every word. Evelyn's voice dripped with calculated warmth. "Good morning, sweetheart. Have you thought about what we discussed?" Daniel sighed. Evelyn didn't let him finish. "Becca and Jason are packing. I told them you wouldn't let them down." Sophia spun around. "Packing?" Daniel's eyes widened. "Mom, I never said—" "Oh, honey," Evelyn cut in, her tone sharp beneath the sweetness. "Do you really want Becca to stay in a motel after just getting married? That's not what family does." Sophia clenched her fists. This wasn't a conversation. It was a trap. Daniel closed his eyes, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, we're still talking about this. You shouldn't have told them." "I had to," Evelyn said smoothly. "Otherwise, where would they go?" Sophia had heard enough. She marched over, grabbing the phone from his hand before he could react. "Evelyn," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you shouldn't have assumed they could stay with us." There was a pause. Then Evelyn let out a low laugh. "Oh, Sophia, I was speaking to my son." "And I'm speaking to my husband," Sophia shot back. "We decide together what happens in our home." Evelyn's tone turned icy. "I see. So you're the one keeping him from helping his sister?" "No, Evelyn. I'm the one reminding him that we're not responsible for cleaning up Becca's mess." There was another pause, but Sophia could practically feel Evelyn's seething frustration through the phone. "Daniel," Evelyn finally said, ignoring Sophia, "if you let your wife drive a wedge between us, you'll regret it." Sophia held out the phone to Daniel. He hesitated, then took it. "Mom, I'll call you later," he said and hung up. Sophia crossed her arms. "You see what she's doing, don't you?" Daniel sighed. dragging a hand through his hair. Yeah, she didn't even wait for my answer. She never planned to, Sophia said. She thinks she's already won. Daniel looked away. I need to go to work. Sophia watched as he grabbed his keys and left without another word. She exhaled, pressing her fingers against her temples. She loved Daniel, but his inability to stand up to his mother was exhausting. Hours later, she was still fuming. Evelyn had already set Becca and Jason up to move in without permission. That wasn't just manipulative, it was invasive. She wasn't going to wait around for Daniel to figure it out. If Evelyn thought she had control over their home, she was about to learn otherwise. Sophia grabbed her purse and keys, her heart pounding as she walked out the door. She was going to see Evelyn. Sophia's hands tightened around the steering wheel as she pulled into Evelyn's driveway. Her heart pounded, but she wasn't going to let fear stop her. If Evelyn thought she could bulldoze her way into their lives, she was wrong. She stepped out of the car, squared her shoulders, and rang the doorbell. Moments later, the door swung open, and there stood Evelyn, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. Sophia, she said smoothly. What a surprise. Sophia didn't bother with pleasantries. We need to talk. Evelyn sighed, stepping aside. Come in, then. Inside, the house was as immaculate as always, the scent of vanilla candles masking the coldness of the space. Sophia refused to sit. She wouldn't be staying long. I'll get straight to the point, she said, her voice steady. You had no right to tell Becca and Jason they could move into our home. Evelyn's expression didn't change. I was only looking out for my daughter. No, Sophia countered. You were looking out for yourself. You knew Daniel wouldn't say no to you, so you went ahead and made the decision for him. Evelyn let out a humorless chuckle. Oh, Sophia, you really think you can come into my house and dictate what I can or can't do? Sophia crossed her arms. This isn't about your house. It's about my house. And I won't let you walk all over us just because you think you can. Evelyn's eyes darkened. You're awfully bold for someone who married into my family. Sophia scoffed. And you're awfully controlling for someone whose son is a grown man. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think you're protecting Daniel, don't you? But I know my son better than you do. He was raised to take care of his family. You may have married him, but you'll never erase that. Sophia held her ground. I don't want to erase that. I want him to have a family that supports him, not one that manipulates him. Evelyn's jaw tightened. You don't understand what it means to be a mother, to sacrifice for your children. Sophia's patience was wearing thin. Being a mother doesn't mean controlling your son's life. It doesn't mean forcing him to be responsible for his sister's mistakes. Evelyn's lips curled into a smirk. And what exactly are you going to do about it? Sophia took a slow breath. I already did it. I made it clear to Daniel that Becca and Jason will not be living with us. For the first time, Evelyn's mask cracked. You had no right. I have every right, Sophia interrupted. Because unlike you, I actually respect Daniel enough to let him make his own choices. Evelyn's nostrils flared. We'll see about that. Sophia turned on her heel and walked out, slamming the door behind her. As she drove home, her hands trembled slightly. She knew this wasn't over. Evelyn wasn't the type to back down, but Sophia wasn't going to back down either. By the time she arrived home, she found Daniel already there, sitting on the couch, looking exhausted. He glanced up as she entered. Where were you? Sophia set her purse down. Talking to your mother. His face paled. Sophia, I had to, she said, sitting beside him. She went too far, Daniel. She told Becca and Jason they could move in without even asking you. That's not just manipulative, that's outright disrespectful. Daniel ran a hand down his face. I know, but Sophia grabbed his hand. There's no but. She's treating you like a child who has no say in his own life. Is that the kind of man you want to be? Daniel exhaled. Of course not. Then prove it, Sophia said softly. Put your foot down. Tell her no. He hesitated, then nodded. I'll talk to her tomorrow. Sophia's heart ached for him. He wasn't a weak man. He was just someone who had been conditioned to put his mother first, but that had to change. The next morning, just as Daniel was about to leave for work, his phone buzzed. Come over. Now. Sophia, who had seen the message, raised an eyebrow. She's not wasting time, is she? Daniel sighed. I have to handle this. She gave him a long look. Make sure you do. When he arrived at Evelyn's house, the door was already open. She was waiting. Sit, she ordered as he stepped inside. Daniel shook his head. No, we need to talk. Evelyn folded her arms. Your wife came here yesterday, throwing accusations. She told the truth, Daniel said firmly. You crossed a line. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. I did what any mother would do. No, Daniel said, his voice steady. You did what you always do, made a decision for me and expected me to go along with it. Evelyn scoffed. So you're choosing her over your own family? Daniel exhaled. She is my family. For a moment, Evelyn looked stunned, then her expression hardened. If you walk out of here and abandon your sister, you'll regret it. Daniel met her gaze. No, Mom. What I'd regret is losing my wife because I was too afraid to stand up to you. He turned and walked out, leaving his mother staring after him. For the first time in his life, Daniel had finally chosen himself. Sophia paced the living room, her fingers tapping restlessly against her arms. Daniel had been gone for nearly an hour. She had wanted to go with him, but this was something he needed to handle on his own. Still, the waiting was unbearable. When the door finally opened, she turned sharply. Daniel stepped inside, looking drained. His shoulders sagged as he set his keys on the counter, rubbing the back of his neck. Sophia searched his face. How did it go? Daniel let out a long breath. I told her no. Relief flooded her chest, but she remained cautious. And? He shook his head, dropping onto the couch. She tried everything, guilt, manipulation, even threats. Said I was turning my back on family, that I would regret this. Sophia sat beside him. And what did you say? Daniel looked up, his eyes holding something she hadn't seen before, certainty. That I'm done letting her control me. A slow smile spread across Sophia's lips. I'm proud of you. He exhaled, leaning back. I just didn't expect it to hurt this much. Sophia reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Of course it hurts. You've spent your whole life putting her needs before yours, but Daniel, this was necessary. He nodded slowly. I know. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Sophia's stomach twisted. You don't think... Daniel stood, his jaw tightening. I do. He walked to the door and pulled it open. Becca stood there, suitcase in hand, her expression a perfect mix of defiance and desperation. Sophia crossed her arms. Of course. Daniel, Becca said, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. Mom kicked us out. Daniel stiffened. What? Becca sniffled. She was so upset after you left. She said if you weren't going to help us, she wasn't either. Jason's parents won't take us, and we have nowhere else to go. Sophia's blood boiled. Evelyn had planned this. She had set this up as a final test, a last-ditch effort to break Daniel's resolve. Daniel hesitated. Becca, No, Sophia interrupted. Becca turned to her, eyes narrowing. Excuse me? Sophia stepped forward. You're not moving in here. Becca let out a disbelieving laugh. Daniel, is this how your wife speaks to family? Daniel rubbed his temple, looking exhausted. Becca, this isn't about Sophia. This is about boundaries. Becca scoffed. Boundaries? We're your family, Daniel. We need you. Sophia took a deep breath. No, Becca. You need to take responsibility for yourself. You and Jason planned a wedding you couldn't afford, and now you want Daniel to clean up the mess. That's not fair. Becca's face twisted with frustration. I can't believe this. Mom was right about you. Sophia's lips curled into a smirk. Let me guess, she said I was controlling, manipulative, turning Daniel against her. Becca's silence was all the confirmation she needed. Daniel sighed. Becca, I love you, but you need to figure this out on your own. We can't take you in. Her eyes flashed with betrayal. So that's it? You're abandoning us? Daniel's jaw clenched. No. But I'm not letting you or Mom run my life anymore. Becca's face turned red with anger. Fine. Don't worry about me. I'll figure it out. She grabbed her suitcase and stormed off, her heels clicking against the hallway floor. Daniel closed the door, exhaling deeply. Sophia watched him carefully. Are you okay? He leaned against the door, eyes closed. I don't know, but I think I will be. Sophia smiled softly. That's all that matters. For the first time since this nightmare started, she felt like they had won. The apartment was eerily quiet after Becca's dramatic exit. Sophia watched Daniel carefully as he stood by the door, his expression unreadable. The weight of everything that had just happened clung to the air like a thick fog. She walked over to him, her voice gentle but firm. Daniel. He let out a deep breath and shook his head. I can't believe she actually showed up here with her bags, expecting us to just take them in, Sophia sighed. You know that wasn't just her. It was Evelyn. She orchestrated the whole thing, hoping you'd cave. Daniel let out a bitter chuckle. And for a moment, I almost did. Sophia lifted her chin. But you didn't. You stood up for yourself. That's what matters. He turned to her, searching her face. Then why do I still feel like I just lost my family? Sophia's chest tightened. She knew that this wasn't easy for him. Evelyn had spent years weaving guilt into his very identity, making him believe that his worth was tied to how much he sacrificed for his mother and sister. She took his hand and squeezed it. Because walking away from a toxic cycle never feels good at first. It feels like betrayal, even when it's survival. Daniel ran a hand down his face. I just don't get it. Becca is an adult. She should be able to handle this. Sophia arched an eyebrow. Why would she? She's never had to before. Evelyn made sure of that. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. I guess I just always thought that one day Mom would see me as more than just someone to fix everything for Becca. Sophia's heart ached for him, but she refused to let him spiral. Daniel, listen to me. You have spent your entire life proving yourself to her, and it has never been enough. It's time to stop waiting for her approval. Daniel swallowed hard. And if she never forgives me? Sophia's voice was soft but unwavering. Then she never truly loved you the way a mother should. Daniel looked away, his jaw tightening. The truth hurt. It always did. The following morning, Sophia woke to the smell of coffee and the soft clinking of dishes in the kitchen. She stretched and glanced at the clock. Daniel was already up. She found him leaning against the counter, staring at his phone. His face was unreadable, but she knew that look. Did she call? She asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. He shook his head. Not a single word, not even a text. Sophia took a slow sip. That's not surprising. She's punishing you. Daniel let out a dry laugh. Yeah, classic Evelyn move. Sophia studied him. How do you feel? He hesitated, then exhaled. Lighter, but also like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. She nodded. She's not done. You know that, right? Daniel met her gaze, something unreadable in his expression. I know. Hours passed with no word from Evelyn or Becca. For the first time in years, Daniel wasn't drowning in messages or guilt-tripping calls. It was a strange kind of peace, one that felt too good to be true. And then, just as the sun began to set, the phone rang. Daniel's stomach tightened as he saw his mother's name flash across the screen. He glanced at Sophia, who gave him a knowing look. He hesitated before answering. "Mom?" Evelyn's voice was cool, distant. "So, this is the kind of son you've become." Daniel inhaled slowly. "Mom, I'm not going to play this game with you." Evelyn scoffed. "A game? Is that what you think this is?" Daniel clenched his jaw. "You're angry because I didn't let Becca and Jason move in. But Mom, it was never their right to." Evelyn's voice turned sharp. "It wasn't about a right, Daniel. It was about family, something you clearly don't value anymore." Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Evelyn continued. "I raised you, sacrificed for you, and this is how you repay me. By turning your back on your sister when she needed you." Sophia watched him carefully, her fingers twitching to take the phone from his hands. But this was his battle. Daniel exhaled. "No, Mom, I'm not turning my back on anyone. I'm just choosing my marriage, my own life, and you can't stand that." Evelyn was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice laced with finality, she said, "You'll regret this, Daniel." The line went dead. Daniel lowered the phone slowly, staring at the screen as if it held all the answers he had spent his life searching for. Sophia stepped closer. "Are you okay?" He let out a slow breath. "She's cutting me off." Sophia wrapped her arms around him. "No, she's testing you. She wants to see if you'll come crawling back." Daniel's eyes darkened. "She's going to be disappointed." Sophia smiled softly. "I knew you'd say that." For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't chasing after his mother's approval, and for the first time, he felt free. A week had passed since Evelyn's final call. Not a single message, not even a passive-aggressive text. Just silence. Daniel expected it to feel like freedom, and in some ways it did. There were no more sudden requests, no guilt-tripping conversations, no expectations weighing him down. But there was also an emptiness, a quiet realization that for the first time in his life, he wasn't tangled in his mother's web. Sophia noticed the shift in him. He carried himself differently, not lighter, but steadier, like a man who had finally chosen himself over duty. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a show neither of them was really paying attention to, Daniel sighed. "She's not coming back, is she?" Sophia muted the TV and turned to face him. "She wants you to come back, but she won't be the one to make the first move." He rubbed his hands together, staring at the coffee table. "And Becca?" Sophia exhaled. "I don't know, but if she wanted to reach out, she would have by now." Daniel leaned back, his head resting against the cushion. "I always thought family was supposed to be unconditional." Sophia gave him a small, sad smile. "Real family is..." But Evelyn's love always had strings attached. He was quiet for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, it did." The next morning, as they sat at the dining table drinking coffee, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression unreadable. Sophia set her mug down. "Her?" "No." He turned the phone so she could see. It was Becca. Sophia's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Are you going to answer?" Daniel hesitated, then pressed accept. "Becca." Her voice came through the line, softer than he expected. "Hey." He didn't respond right away, waiting. Becca sighed. I wanted to say that I get it now." Daniel straightened. "You do?" Becca let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, Mom isn't talking to me either." Sophia's eyes widened slightly, but she stayed silent, letting Daniel handle it. She cut you off?" he asked. "She said if I couldn't convince you to do the right thing, then I was just as ungrateful as you." Daniel's stomach twisted. He had always known Evelyn played favorites, but he never thought she'd turn on Becca so quickly. "What are you going to do?" he asked carefully. "I don't know," Becca admitted, "but I guess I have to figure it out." For the first time, she sounded like an adult. Daniel exhaled. "I hope you do." There was a pause, then a quiet, hesitant, "I'm sorry." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. He knew Becca still had a long way to go, but this was something. "I'm sorry too," he said. Becca sniffled. "I'll talk to you later." Daniel nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Yeah, take care, Becca." He hung up and set his phone down. Sophia watched him carefully. "Well," she said, "that was unexpected." Daniel rubbed his chin. "Yeah. Do you believe her?" He thought about it for a moment. "I believe that she's starting to see Mom for who she really is." Sophia nodded. "That's a start." Daniel looked at her, his expression softening. "You know, I don't think I would have been able to do this without you." Sophia reached across the table, taking his hand. "You always could. You just needed to believe it." He squeezed her hand, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I do now." For the first time in his life, Daniel wasn't chasing validation. He wasn't waiting for approval that would never come. He was standing on his own, with Sophia by his side, and that was enough. And what about you? What would you do if your mother-in-law tried to control your marriage? Would you stand your ground, or would you give in to the pressure? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps me keep bringing more exciting stories your way.